Hello, everyone, guys. I hope I'm audible and visible. Can you guys see me? Can you guys hear me? If we could get a confirmation on this. I hope everyone's keeping well. A very good afternoon. I hope the weather's keeping us well and the prep is going really well. That is very important. So, today we're going to start with another editorial RC, guys. I'll be just sharing my screen. I hope it's visible already. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to start with some passages again, very interesting passages, or and not very tough level of passages, but the ones which are close to what we have in, close to mock RCs, but still they're not the hardest ones. Okay, so when it comes to any reading comprehension, as you might be knowing as well, any passage, it comprises of three sections. It has an introduction, it's like the window to the entire movie you watch, right? The first few paragraphs, or maybe the first paragraph itself, is like an introduction to the entire passage. Then comes the body of the passage. When we say body, it is more about examples, analogies, reasoning behind why a certain claim has been stated by the author. And last of all comes the conclusion. By conclusion, we mean that is the point where the author is opining about whatever he's claimed in the very first paragraph, right? So, similar kind of structure we'll also see today in one of the passages which we'll be discussing now. Okay, and apart from that, what is very important is that any question type which is asked to you, it could be a fact based question, it could be an inference based question. Not necessarily would that question be tough or easy depending on whether it's a fact or an inference based questions. It becomes tough when we have a lot of options very close, right? When what is being asked is not directly mentioned in the passage, and still getting insights from the passage becomes really tough, right? That's what makes the question tough. And sometimes you find that the question is easy even though it's an inferential question. Even though it's not mentioned directly in the passage, the insights drawn, becomes really easy to understand where the question is coming from. So this is what helps us in figuring out whether the question is easy or tough and whether the RC has to be dealt with or not. So this is the first passage we are discussing. The paragraph 1 is flashed on your screen. Please have a look at the passage. Let me know once you're done reading, and then I'll move you to the next slide. We'll be discussing what is there in the entire passage, and then we move to the questions. So please have a look at the passage 1, paragraph 1. Read it aloud to yourself. Understand what is the author referring to. What is the tone of the author here, right? Many a times you'll find that the passage itself conveys a lot, what the entire passage does not, but the first paragraph itself conveys a lot about it. So sometimes you get an understanding where to skip, where to scan as well. So please have a look at the first paragraph and then we take you to the next slide. Guys, please let me know if you can move ahead to the next slide. I hope understanding the passage is not a tough deal. right? So this paragraph is more of an introduction. Okay. And as I told you, any passage would have an introduction, it would have the body of the passage, and then it will also have the conclusion, right? Any passage has these three sections. When it comes to body, you have more of the examples, the illustrations, the analogies, and the relations shared. So please move ahead to the next slide. Have a look at the second one. This is more of the body of the passage. When we say body, it would have analogies, some examples. The tone gets rhetorical or repetitive. And of course, there will be some relations shared. Okay. Relations could be X is to Y, A is to B. Right? There can also be some questions asked for the same. Okay. This is what the body of the passage refers to. All right, let's move ahead to the next slide now. Okay, guys, let's move to the questions post we're done reading. So let's have a look at the passage together. What does the passage have to convey? I hope we were able to understand it better already. Still, just for being on the same page as per the questions being asked later on, I would take you through it together. Okay. So the passage talks about domestic economy expanded in a remarkably vigorous and steady fashion. It says domestic economy expanded in a remarkably vigorous and steady fashion. The resurgence in consumer confidence was reflected in the higher proportion of incomes spent for goods and services and the marked increase in consumer willingness to take on installment debt. Okay, so one we're talking about is domestic economic expansion that happened very vigorously. Which time, what is it referring to? We do not know yet. The resurgence in consumer confidence was reflected in the higher proportion of incomes. So all of a sudden we saw that consumer confidence increased. That was reflected in the higher proportion of income spent for goods and services and the marked increase in consumer willingness to take on installment debt. A parallel strengthening in business psychology was manifested in a stepped up rate of plant and equipment spending and a gradual pickup in outlays for inventory. Right? So, parallel strengthening in business psychology, like till now, the business psychology wasn't strong enough, right? But now we saw that it was getting strengthened, was manifested in a stepped up rate of plant and equipment spending and a gradual pickup in outlays for inventory. So it's like if we talk about Blinkit, you know what Blinkit does? Or if we talk about, say, Zepto, what they do is they have their black stores, right? They have their inventory stores. So they pick up stuff from here and provide to the delivery location, right? The guys, they pick up stuff from here and provide the stuff to the delivery location. So now their business psychology was manifested in a stepped up rate of plant and equipment spending and a gradual pickup in outlays for inventory. So these inventory stores, if they increase, that means the Blinkit is increasing its business, it's expanding. Confidence in the economy was also reflected in the strength of the stock market and in the stability of the bond market. For the year as a whole, consumer and business sentiment benefited from rising public expectations that a resolution of the conflict in Vietnam was in prospect and that East West tensions were easing. So it seems to be a passage from history. That confidence in the economy was also reflected in the strength of the stock market. So even the stock market increased, it became better. This shows that people were investing in that particular industry or that particular product. Stability of the bond market. For the year as a whole, consumer and business sentiment benefited from rising expectations that a resolution of the conflict in Vietnam was in prospect and that East West tensions were easing out. Those tensions were coming down. United States balance of payment deficit declined sharply. Now it's talking about how United States balance of payments deficit declined shortly. Naturally, when it says underlying task of public policy for the year ahead and indeed for the longer run remained a familiar one. Naturally, when it says underlying task of public policy for the year ahead and indeed for the longer run. So I missed the first part. It says deficit declined sharply. Whatever was in debt, whatever was less, whatever was being used from outside, that was reducing. However, by any other test, the deficit remained very large and there was actually a substantial deterioration in our trade account to a sizable deficit. So the deficit went on decreasing, almost two-thirds of which was with Japan. Underlying task of public policy for the year ahead and indeed for the longer run remained a familiar one. That is to strike the right balance between encouraging healthy economic growth and avoiding inflationary pressures. So, with the economy showing sustained and vigorous growth, and with the currency crisis highlighting the need to improve our competitive posture internationally, the emphasis seemed to be shifting to the problem of inflation. So now everything was shifting on inflation. The phase 3 program of wage and price restraint can contribute to dampening inflation. So then it's talking about how program of wage and price restraint, that is the phase 3 program we're referring to, it can contribute to dampening inflation. So this led to pulling down the inflation. Unless productivity growth is unexpectedly large, however, expansion of real output must eventually begin to slow down to the economy's larger run growth potential if generalized demand pressures and prices are to be avoided. So whatever demand pressures we feel, are there. If we want to avoid this, if we want to avoid this, then expansion of real output must eventually begin to slow down to the economy's larger run growth if generalized demand pressures on prices are to be avoided. So indeed, while the unemployment rates of a bit over 5% were still too high, it seems doubtful whether the much lower rates of a percent and below, often cited as appropriate definitions of full employment, do in fact represent feasible goals for the United States economy unless there are improvements in the structure of labor and product markets and public policies influencing their operation. So, what it's referring to now here is, so this passage might seem very boring because it talks about a lot of public policy and inflation going up and down, touching on the business a bit. Unless productivity growth is unexpectedly large, जब तक productivity growth बहुत unexpectedly large नहीं होगा, expansion of real output must eventually begin to slow down to the economy's larger run growth potential. तो naturally जो expansion of real output है वो उतना अच्छे से expand नहीं होगा. Indeed, while the unemployment rates of a bit over 5% were still too high, it seems doubtful whether the much lower rates of 4% and below, often shown as appropriate definitions of full employment, do it in fact represent feasible goals for the United States economy. Right? Unless there are improvements in the structure of labor and product markets. जब तक इसमें कुछ improvement नहीं होगा product of market में and structure of labor में, तब तक उतना कुछ फायदा नहीं है. There is little doubt that overall unemployment rates can be brought down to 4% or less. So overall economic rate जो है, that unemployment rate, that could be reduced. However, resultant inflationary pressures have in the past proved exceedingly difficult to contain. So inflation would still keep on going high, right? Inflationary pressure are always high. Right? So we've discussed the entire passage. I want to give you 2 minutes and figure out the GST of the passage. Now, what is the GST? How many of us know what is the GST, guys? No, it's not goods and services taxes. It's something I want you guys to figure out on the basis of this. Is my screen visible, guys? It's a blank sheet I could see. But all I want you to figure out is the GST, that is general idea, structure, and tone. Okay? So this is the GST. That is the general idea of the passage, the structure of the passage, and tone and title of the passage. Please figure it out for me for the entire passage. Then we move ahead to questions, giving you 2 minutes, quick 2 minutes for this. Guys, if you're done, please type it down in the chat box. I'm waiting for everyone's answers. Okay, so what's the general idea about? It's about how the economy expanded, how the inflation, which is going earlier, like skyrocketing inflation rates, they came down. The business psychology strengthened, which manifested in a stepped up rate of plant and equipment spending, right? And consumer business sentiment benefited from rising public expectation that a resolution to the conflict in Vietnam was in prospect. It was showing that there was a conflict and that East-West tensions were easing out. United States balance of payments deficit declined sharply. However, by other tests, the deficit remained very large and there was actually a substantial deterioration of trade account to a sizable deficit. So, we got to know that the deficit remained very large and there was actually a substantial deterioration of trade, right? So earlier there was a substantial deterioration of the trade, but later on that also improved, two-thirds of which was Japan. Underlying task of public policy for the year ahead and indeed for the longer run remained a familiar one, to strike the right balance between encouraging healthy economic growth, avoiding inflationary inflationary pressures. And unless productivity growth is unexpectedly large, expansion of real output must eventually begin to slow down, right? So क्या था, प्रोडक्टिविटी ग्रोथ उतना स्ट्रांग जब तक नहीं होगा तब तक एक्सपैंड नहीं कर सकते, लेकिन वो एक्सपैंड कर रहा था, इसका मतलब प्रोडक्टिविटी ग्रोथ वाज growing, right? The rate was rising. So indeed, while the unemployment rates of a bit over 5% will still too high, it seems doubtful whether the much lower rates of 4% and below are often cited as apt definitions of full employment. Do in fact represent feasible goals for the United States economy unless there are improvements in the structure of labor and product markets and public policy influencing their operation. There is little doubt that overall unemployment rates can be brought down to 4% or less for a time, or at least by sufficient stimulation or of aggregate demand. However, resultant inflationary pressures have in the past proved exceedingly difficult to contain. So let's now have a look at the questions. So GST mein general idea is very much about economic expansion and that too getting the inflationary rates lowered. Structure is the role of each paragraph, right? Structure the passage means role of each paragraph, the functionality of each paragraph. So the first paragraph talks about remarkably rigorous and steady fashion, introduces the idea. Second, third gives concrete examples कि United States में क्या हो रहा था. And then third one is relating to analogy कि productivity growth is unexpectedly large. However, expansion of real output must eventually begin to slow down to the economy's large degree. That is what it shows. Let's have a look at the questions now. So, passage was most likely published in a popular magazine, general newspaper, science journal, or financial journal, or is it a textbook? So, I want to give you one moment to think and answer. I'm not giving you answer right away. 30 seconds, 40 seconds. I want you guys to answer in the chat box. Only then do we move ahead. Guys, please answer in the chat box. Guys, can we discuss it now at least? I'm sure you must have gotten the answer for this. So if you try to figure out the answer, popular magazine, general newspaper, So again, article kahan se aaya hai? The answer to this question is D Delhi. But I want you guys to first go into that process of figuring out why is it D Delhi. You know, so again, passage comes from domestic economic expansion. That's what it says, right? So somewhere we're talking about economy, right? We're talking about what happened. So it is not capturing any scientific formula or theories. It's not talking about any general article. It's very much clear on, you know, the financial knowledge being captured. So financial journal. Textbook bhi nahi hoga. Science bhi nahi hoga. It should be D Delhi. I hope this was clear, guys. Let's move to the next one now. Confidence in the economy was expressed by all of the following except strong stock market, stable bond market, increased installment debt, increased plant and equipment expenditures, rising interest rates. Okay, so question number two. I want everyone to please answer it. Look at the question. If you want me to take you back to the passage, I can take you back. Basically, for confidence in the economy. But have a look at this particular thing. And then the important thing is you have to choose for what is not given in the passage. All right, can we discuss the question? I hope everyone is ready with the question. Let's have a look at the question together. What are we talking about in the question, guys? Confidence in the economy was expressed by all of the following except, right? So whatever is given in the passage is not my answer. So can I say strong stock market? So this is one of the factors which is given. Therefore, this is not my answer. Stable bond market, yes. Therefore, not the right answer. Increase installment debt, yes, it was there. Therefore, not the correct answer because it's about except what is not. Increase plant and equipment expenditures given in the passage, therefore not the answer. Rising interest rates, nothing hasn't mentioned about the rising interest rate. It did talk about inflation, but nowhere the rising interest rates. So can we consider this option? No. We are looking for something which is not mentioned in the passage. So accordingly, we answer the question. I hope this question is clear, guys. In case not, please drop in the chat box and I'm going to help you out with the question here. In case we're done with this, let's move ahead to the next question. Please have a look at the question. According to the passage, a major problem is how to what? Have a look at the question and then we discuss it. Guys, can we discuss the question? I think we've spent enough time on the question. According to the passage, a major problem in how to sustain economic growth, improve labor productivity, balance growth with low inflation, stimulate demand, or avoid large increase in imports. Right. So, if you look at the options, which one do you think is the correct one? It should be stimulate demand. That is a major problem we are talking about. We have inflation, but how do we stimulate demand? Okay. So, D option is the correct answer. Okay. Let's have a look at the next question. Please let me know if you're done with the question. Most of the trade deficit and the balance of payment was attributed to trade with which country? The question has already answered it. Like if you look at the the entire passage, we know we're talking about Japan. The answer has to be Bombay. This was an easy question. So I hope overall passage understanding was good. We were able to figure out the right answers. If not, let's try to improve in the next passage we have. Very quickly moving ahead to the next one, guys. We'll be pacing up a little now because it is the one which has two passages within one. Like this is passage two, but A part of it and then there's a B part of it. Then we have some few questions for it. Okay, so I've shown you the stretch of it. Now let's have a look at the first part. Please have a look at the paragraph one. Let me know once you're done. I'll take you to the next slide. Okay, moving ahead to the next one. All right, next slide. Moving ahead to the next one. It's passage B of the same passage, second part of it. Okay, very small paragraph, 30 seconds. 30 seconds for this. Next one. Okay, moving ahead. Guys, moving to the last. Okay, Now we have questions, but before we move to the questions, let's quickly discuss how are these two passages placed, what is the understanding, what is the general idea, structure, and tone of the passage, and then we eventually move to the questions. Okay, I hope this passage was not much tough to understand. Of course, we're talking about taxes. It could have been a little boring. I'm sure it must have been, but not very boring. It says in 1994, Estonia became the first country to introduce a flat tax. So there's a flat tax system and there's a progressive tax system. As your salary bracket increases, your taxes increase, like what we have in India. Flat tax is whatever it is, it's a certain percentage. On personal and corporate income, income is taxed at a single uniform rate of 26%, no schedule of rates, no deductions. So far, 8 countries have followed Estonia's example, an old idea that for decades elicited the response fine in theory, just not practical in the real world. So this is the response it got, that it's like you're taxing someone, but it's more like a fine somebody's paying for. It doesn't work in a practical real world. Seems to be working as well as in practice as it does on the blackboard. Practical types who said that flat tax cannot work offer a further instant objections once they are shown such taxes working. Namely, they are unfair. Enlightened countries, it is argued, have progressive tax systems. So now they're introducing the other tax system, that is progressive tax system. As your salary bracket increases, so does your tax system increases. Okay. So it is argued have progressive tax systems requiring high income earners to forfeit a bigger share of their incomes in taxes than low income earners have to pay. So flat tax seems to rule this out in principle. It's like the flat tax system has just ruled it out. Not so. A flat tax on personal incomes combines a threshold that is an exempt amount. Okay. So what happened is it's referring to here that a flat tax system seems to rule this out in principle. What is it trying to rule out? The progressive tax system. Okay. Progressive tax system जो है वो इतना अच्छा नहीं है जितना अच्छा flat tax system है. Right? They're still promoting FTS. And then here it says not so. It's actually not that the progressive tax system is ruled out. It's trying to say that it still stays. A flat tax on personal incomes combines a threshold that is an exempt amount with a single rate of tax on all income above it. The extent to which such a system is progressive can be varied within wide limits using these two variables. Under the systems operating in most developed countries, the incentives for high income earners to avoid tax are enormous, and the opportunities to do so, which arise from the very complexity of codes, are commensurately large. Like there are collectively very large opportunities. So it is unsurprising that high income earners usually pay about as much tax under new tax system regime as they would have paid under the previous code. So it doesn't seem to be a very differential form of a system. So far in passage A, this is what we understood, that what it's trying to say is that it is not, uh, the that the flat tax system is making the people pay a lot. It is not so. The flat tax system may be people are paying almost as much as they were paying under previous codes. Previous codes, matlab, it could be the progressive tax. Now, passage B starts with a lot of people don't understand graduated as opposed to flat taxes. They think that if you are making more money, you pay a higher rate on your entire earnings, which seems unfair. Actually, graduated progressive taxes treat all taxpayers equally. Now they're talking about the graduated taxpayers, right? So it's like GTP, the graduated taxpayers are all being treated equally. Every taxpayer pays that same rate on equivalent layers of income. People in higher brackets don't pay the higher rate on their entire income, only on the portion of income over a specified amount. People, not dollars, are treated equally. That's what it says. So all people are created equal, but not all dollars are created equal. Earnings of the working poor go almost entirely for survival expenses, just food, shelter, and clothing. At that level, every dollar is critical. Even a small difference causes tremendous changes in quality of life. Middle income earners are still very conscious of expenses, but have become much greater flexibility in absorbing small fluctuations in income. Right? So what we're talking about is middle class and high class people. Middle income earners are still very conscious of expenses. So they're very conscious of what they do not have, not much disposable income. Okay. They do not have a lot of disposable income, due to which they're still very concerned about where they're spending. So they're very conscious of their expenditures, but they're very conscious of the expenditures, but have much greater flexibility in absorbing small fluctuations in income. Even some of the flat tax proposals recognize this and want to exempt a primary layer from the tax system altogether. Right? When it says so, they recognize that survival dollars are different from discretionary dollars. Why go suddenly from one extreme to another? Since flat tax proposals are supposed to be bringing in the same total amount of tax revenue, if the working poor are going to pay less and high income earners are going to pay less, it is naturally going to fall on the middle class to make up the difference. Very interesting passage where the last paragraph shows that if you talk about the progressive tax system, that is better. If you look at the flat tax system, it nowhere is close to what we are paying through the flat tax system. In flat tax system, naturally, we end up paying more, and in graduated progressive taxes, only the people who are actually incoming high, who are actually earning more, are the ones who are paying for it, right? Every taxpayer pays the same amount on equivalent layers of income. People in higher brackets don't pay the rate on the entire income. So that's what it says, right? So I hope the passage was clear, guys. Let's have a look at some quick questions very quickly, and then we discuss this out. Okay, let's have a look at the question. It says both passages are concerned with answering which of the following questions. Can a flat tax be implemented? Do graduated progressive taxes treat all taxpayers equally? Can a flat tax be fair to all taxpayers? What are some objections to progressive taxes? Or do flat tax regimes reduce illegal tax avoidance? Right? So both the passages are comparing something, both the passages are tackling the question around one particular system. So what is that one, system they want us to answer? So if you look at the options, it says, can a flat tax be implemented? Is it about just a flat tax being implemented? No. Do graduated progressive taxes treat all taxpayers equally? Can a flat tax be fair to all taxpayers? Right? That is what we are trying to answer. कि flat tax क्या सबके लिए इक्वल रहेगा? क्या वो फेयर हो सकता है एक्चुअली? दैट इज व्हाट वी आर ट्राइंग टू ब्रिंग एन आंसर टू. What are some objections to progressive taxes? No. Or do flat tax regimes reduce illegal tax avoidance? No. So E is also something you can eliminate. So answer is D, Delhi for this question. Oh, sorry, C, Calcutta for this question. Right? It is C, Calcutta. Okay, let's move to the next one. Both passages seek to advance their arguments by means of which of the following: accusing opponents of shifting their ground, citing specific historical developments, or is it arguing on basis of an analogy, or is it employing the rhetorical questions or correcting alleged misunderstandings? So this is what they're doing. They're actually correcting us of misunderstandings, right? So answer for this particular question has to be E echo. I hope these questions were helpful, guys. I hope everything we read would add to the value. So whenever we meet next, we'll be discussing more sessions, more passages, and of course, we'll be having more sessions for you. Thank you so very much, guys, and see you very soon. Thank you so much.